Hadley, it's an interesting one, isn't it? Because as pressure continues to build in Washington, I'm curious what the feeling is on the ground in Riyadh where you are, because judging by that speech we had from King Salman, it does seem as though they really want to move on with business as normal.
Absolutely, Nancy, and I think that was reflected certainly in the King's comments, but also in the comments that we heard from Adel al-Jubeir, the foreign minister of Saudi Arabia, yesterday, quoted in the local press here. He was essentially saying that they believe that the CIA report that we expect to be released later today has no basis in fact. This is a report, of course, that NBC News has confirmed does make a link between Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman and the death of Jamal Khashoggi. And of course, what we've seen over the last couple of days in particular from President Trump has been a seeming willingness to dance around this and not to press for more information, or at least not to seemingly press for that smoking gun. So I think it's going to be really interesting over the next several hours as we await these report from Washington, is whether or not we're going to continue to see that bipartisan effort on Capitol Hill to really get to the bottom of this, as well as some kind of response from Riyadh, because the folks that I've been speaking to here on the ground are very, very concerned about really what is brand damage to the kingdom after these weeks of uncertainty regarding Mr. Khashoggi's death. They're very, very worried about what this means for foreign investment. They wonder how they're going to be able to claw the narrative back here. And I think what's going to be interesting is whether or not, for example, there may be an open trial of the 5 suspects who are now facing the death penalty potentially here in Saudi Arabia because of their involvement with Mr. Khashoggi. And of course, we've seen the ripple effects of this story as well, obviously with this news coming out overnight in the Wall Street Journal essentially saying that Saudi Aramco has decided not to issue corporate bonds in their purchase of Sabic. And that really does beg the question, how risky a play is Saudi Arabia going forward?
Yes, Hadley, I think that's an excellent point with the Saudi Aramco angle, and talking about just the perception, the reaction from the brand Saudi Arabia, as you point out, which also makes me think of, we did hear the reports yesterday from Saudi Arabia that Crown Prince MBS will be going to the G20 meeting at the end of the month. No doubt he's going to be meeting there with a lot of the leaders from countries that have been quite critical of the human rights record in Saudi Arabia, of this latest case with Jamal Khashoggi as well. I wonder how this delicate balancing act will work out.
Exactly, Nancy, and it's also all about oil, isn't it? Because that'll be just a few days ahead of this OPEC, non-OPEC meeting in Vienna, where I will be live on the ground chasing up oil ministers and trying to really set the scene for our viewers, because at the end of the day, this is about relationships, isn't it? It's about whether or not the Russians will actually continue to stay on board here. And I think it's really going to be interesting to see what we hear over the next couple of weeks from these 3 leaders, what we hear coming out of Russia from Vladimir Putin, what we hear obviously coming out of the United States from President Trump, and then what we see from Saudi Arabia. So it's going to be a really, really interesting couple of weeks. Hey everybody, it's Hadley Gamble from our new CNBC Middle East Bureau in Abu Dhabi. Thanks for stopping by. Now, to watch more, you can try one of the videos that just popped up on your screen. And don't forget to subscribe.